Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out, WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman. We're going to talk a bit about amateur boxing now, obviously in Fitzroy Lodge Gym in London, which is a famous amateur gym. Just talk a little bit about the threat to amateur boxing in terms of possibly not being in the Olympics going forward, and what your views on that are.
Well, boxing is the oldest sport in the history of humanity. Boxing was a founding sport of the Olympics and has been in the modern Olympics since 1904. To have or to simply think that boxing would be out of the Olympics is something that cannot happen. The WBC, the world community of the sport, is fully behind hoping that something is done to alleviate the problems that the IOC has with AIBA and that boxing remains in the Olympics.
Putting tradition aside, and we know that's very important, what effect would boxing no longer being an Olympic sport have on the professional side of the sport?
Well, of course, every boxer is born through the amateur ranks. In order to become a boxer, you have to start in the amateurs, the grassroots boxing. And traditionally, Olympic Games have been the greatest platform. It's a dream of every boxer to win a medal for their country. And then some retire and continue their life, some go into professional boxing. So even though it's the same sport, they are different. Amateur boxing, professional boxing. But to think that Olympic will be out of the picture would have a tremendous effect on the overall picture of the sport.
It seems like strange timing as well. It's only recently that we've seen female boxing added to the Olympic schedule. Why do you think so soon after that we're now talking about boxing being eliminated entirely?
Well, we've been warning this for decades. Somehow the Olympic movement in the sport got diverged. It went to a different. Boxing and Olympics and amateur should be exclusively look into the development of amateur boxing, of those kids who are young, who are in their country, dreaming of being representing their country and making their countrymen proud of an Olympic medal. But we'll see what happens. I am sure everything will be corrected. Boxing will remain in the Olympics.
What role, if any, can the WBC play in this situation in terms of helping that to stay the case?
We have contacted the IOC. The IOC responded that we must go through AIBA and talk to them and see what can be done. We have done that. We're reaching out to AIBA, and we just offer independent panel of experts, of boxing lovers, to try to mediate and to make things correct. We have no other intentions than to see the sport continue growing in the whole world.
As you understand the situation, what are the main issues that the IOC has with AIBA?
What I see is governance, the world governance, the practical, the economics, the open books, officiating, and the doping control of the sport.
Where has it all gone wrong in recent years? Do you think AIBA have become distracted by some of their newer concepts, for example, WSB and things like that?
Absolutely. AIBA went south. They went wrong. Amateur boxing is amateur boxing. Professional boxing is professional boxing. When you cannot mix them. You cannot have a professional athlete, especially of the high ranks like Anthony Joshua. Can you imagine Anthony Joshua right now, who's the heavyweight champion of the world, go in and compete in the Olympics? The Olympics, you're trained to compete in a 15-day span several times. Professional boxing, you're trained for one night. You make the weight, you fight, and you go home. So it's a completely different scenario, and there should not be any combination. But Olympic boxing is great, amateur boxing is great, so that should remain that way.
So if Olympic boxing were to continue, you'd like it to be purely with amateur boxers, no professionals or ex-professionals allowed to go back to the amateurs?
No, because that is not the spirit of the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games are for young, active kids that are dreaming and do not do the sport as a profession. Once you turn professional, you box for money. In the amateur, you box for glory.
What about the World Series of Boxing? Because initially people seemed to celebrate it because it seemed to bridge the gap between amateur boxing and professional boxing. A lot of critics had said that the two sides of the sport had grown too far apart. Do you go along with that you need some kind of middle ground to get people ready to turn professional?
No, there's no middle ground because it was only invented for commercial and monetary reasons. Amateur boxing can only be for the sport. It has no business in the professional. Professional business is for the promoters of the sport, like Don King, Bob Arum, Golden Boy, Oscar de la Hoya, Matchroom. That is what the promoters do in professional boxing. What we do is we take care of the medicals and the administrative. What AIBA must do is take care of amateur boxing and prepare competition for the Olympics.
How confident are you that AIBA will come round to this mediation and change some of their practices?
I want to be 100% confident that it will be solved and boxing will remain in the Olympics.
Brilliant. Mauricio, thank you for your time, and we hope it stays in the Olympics as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.